Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Star Scholars Leadership Series. I am your host, Dr. Mary McConnor, and today we have Dr. Wondwossen Gebreyes from The Ohio State University. Welcome.
Thank you, MJ.
We're so happy to have you. And just for our listeners and people who are watching on YouTube, we were actually ACE fellows together. And so we're a part of the same cohort. So that's how we got to know each other. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I said, oh, we have to have you on here to learn more about your story because you do have such a fascinating story. And, I guess for the first question, we'll start off. Can you walk us through your professional journey and how you ended up in higher education?
Great. Thank you so much, MJ. Again, great to join the Star Scholars. Looks like a fantastic global network. So very much look forward to this conversation. So I grew up in Ethiopia, in Eastern Africa, as a son of a Korean War veteran that, since early childhood, I valued service to society. That's been instilled in me. Growing up in Ethiopia, further in higher education, I received my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree at Addis Ababa University, one of really a very well-established, renowned university in Africa. And then I specialized, I did my PhD in comparative biomedical sciences or population medicine program at North Carolina State University. So I've always been committed to health and livelihood of our communities. In the last 24 years, I served in two R1 public land-grant universities, initially at North Carolina State University, in the last 16 years at The Ohio State University. In these two universities, I served in various capacities. Initially, in fact, I joined NC State as a staff member. So I know what it looks like to be a staff member, then moved on to do my PhD as a graduate student. So I know how to be a student as well, and then a faculty member and worked through the ranks from assistant to all the way to full professorship. Then in terms of leadership, I've been serving in different capacities at the college-wide and currently at the university-wide program. I serve as the executive director of the Global One Health Initiative at Ohio State. I also serve as the president of a non-governmental organization, affiliated entity that's wholly owned by Ohio State.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for that. Can you walk us through in terms of, when you went to grad school, did you know, like, okay, one day I want to pursue a faculty position, or one day I want to be an executive director over a department, because most people, when they get their PhDs, especially in a STEM field, they go out and they work for a company or an organization, and being a faculty member isn't necessarily at the top of the list. So I'm wondering, for you, was that something you always aspired to? Did you know you wanted to work in the academy?
Well, interestingly, I did not know. In life, I take things one step at a time. As I was about to finish my PhD, perhaps 6 months before, I did not even know whether I do academia or whether I go to industry. I was not sure at all. Often, people, mentors play a critical role in our life, as well as, I was not really confident enough whether I would be right after finishing my PhD. I would get quite a few offers for a faculty position. I did not anticipate that. But what happened was, as I get closer to finish up my PhD, within a few months, I got requests for interviews for faculty positions. So, well, I said, okay, can I really be, a faculty member in higher education? Where, just a few years before that, I came from Africa, and in fact, my first job was a parking attendant at NIH, the US NIH, where I currently serve as a member of one of its board of advisors. But at the time, I didn't have the confidence, even as I finished my PhD, so I was not certain. But my graduate committee members and advisors really encouraged me. Of course, in fact, what happened was at NC State, there was an open position that was not filled for 2 years or so. So one of my mentors told me, in fact, we were always, discussing about when you finish, you can fill this position. Then I applied for that position, competed for that, and got the offer at NC State, in fact, as well as two other universities. So I was fortunate, as well as I worked hard for it to be into academia. But then I never really dreamed to be executive director or, to go step by step. But one thing for sure is I was always committed, number one, to work hard. I always love serving others. So, I serve with all my heart to every step that I got in a position that I was offered to. But also at the same time, I never thought I will not be able to do it. I can achieve much more than what I achieved now. I was always deep inside of me. I was confident and persevere. I faced so many challenges in life, but I always, I've been persistent and overcome challenges. So deep inside, I'm confident, but always, I don't anticipate what I do next step. So things just happen one step at a time.
Right. Yeah. And you touched on so many different important points. And that was actually going to be one of my questions for you is, what do you think it takes to be a leader in higher education? And then I guess as a add-on to that, a lot of faculty, they go into academia not necessarily ever wanting to take on a leadership position. Their goal is to, get tenure and become a full professor. But let's say they are tapped on the shoulder to be a department head or executive director. What would you say to that person as well to prepare them to be a leader in higher education?
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's an excellent question. I think first of all, leadership is service. That's what I truly believe, and I'm sure many leaders would agree. So the person needs to be really service-oriented and have the passion to serve others. Not everyone may be interested or passionate to serve. In a typical traditional faculty position, is often, you're expected to establish an independent program, right? Whether it is research intensive or teaching certain number of courses and so on. So some people really enjoy, are passionate to do that. While others, I myself believe that serving others would really amplify my potential. So I think that service-oriented nature is extremely important. Secondly, I believe, leaders need to have the integrity to do the right thing in the best interest of the unit. There are many times that personally you want to do something, whereas when you think of the unit as a whole, your decision might be slightly different to your personal feelings. So I think leaders should be able to really discuss deep inside themselves in terms of, showing high integrity. You also need to have courage to make hard decisions. Sometimes you have to do uncomfortable decisions. I think that service, integrity, courage would be, core components of leadership. And with this day and age, as we live in this interconnected world, and our higher education has many challenges as well as potentials, I think, someone who highly values partnership and collaboration, I think would be very important. I think those are the kinds of characteristics. In terms of, what advice I would give to, rising stars or, early care faculty who would be, potentially entertaining leadership positions. I think first of all, I think everybody has to realize that leadership is not entitlement bestowed to some people or unique members of our community. Any of us have the potential to be leaders, to make a difference, to serve others. Anyone can be a leader. So, I think it's really very important to recognize that first. I think people tend to assume, I used to assume, by the way, honestly speaking, in terms of, I never thought I would lead. And even though at heart, I believe in myself, I always believed for a long time, like, I wouldn't be tapped into, or people would not appreciate my leadership. But I think as long as you have the commitment to serve and integrity, I think that is for anyone. Can be a department chair or a dean or any type of higher education leader. Of course, in terms of at the tactical level, the necessary lessons of how you sharpen your leadership skills, competencies is very important, no doubt about that. And as you and I know very well as well, the American Council on Education is one of the highly prestigious and well-respected fellowship in higher education leadership. But as faculty members move up the ranks, definitely there are many ways people can sharpen their leadership skills and competencies. So yeah, that's what I would say for now, but happy to, and there are many thoughts come to my mind.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I love that you put an emphasis on the importance of servant leadership, because it really is a service to the organization, and to your colleagues. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that because it can feel burdensome. Like it's a lot of work, a lot of paperwork, administration. It comes with completely different rules and regulations when you're dealing with budgets, and you're dealing with all of these different things, and you have to deal with certain departments. And so it's really important to always keep that in mind, like this is a service to the institution and my colleagues. So I appreciate that you talked about that.
Absolutely. I think, also as people have to recognize, leadership is not like an easy way of fulfilling your duties. People need to have a thick skin, and it's really stressful, whether it's personnel, whether it is budget or many issues. So yeah, it could be stressful, but, you have to be able to carry on that, stress to serve others. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess I would like to hear more about your experience at Michigan State University. And so for our listeners and individuals watching on YouTube, uh, you had a chance to do your fellowship with the American Council on Education at Michigan State University for a year. And so do you feel like that has changed your perspective on leadership? And because I could easily see you being a provost one day, I mean, if that's what you wanted. But what has that experience done for you in terms of professional development and just overall shaping your, I guess, perception of what it's like to be a leader? Because you did work really closely with the university president and several key leaders there at the institution.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was hosted at Michigan State University in East Lansing, worked very closely with my primary mentor, President Sam Stanley, a fantastic mentor, as well as co-mentors with the Provost Teresa Woodruff and Executive Vice President for Health Sciences, Norm Beauchamp, and, a number of leaders across the university with the deans, senior vice presidents, and many others. So it's been really a great experience, and I would like to take this opportunity to really show how grateful I am to Michigan State University community. As a comprehensive public university, definitely Michigan State provided me a number of opportunities on higher education, leadership skills, competencies, and really exposure. But just first off, for me, number one, it was very much clarifying here, what does it take to be a higher education leader, as well as, to me personally, which direction do I want to go? It really allowed me to have a clear mind. Secondly, it was also confirmatory in a way that, again, sometimes, when you are a low-level, mid-level leader and you think of higher leaders, you think of very extremely special type of people, but these are one of us. Once upon a time, they were faculty members, they were center directors, they were vice president for research or deans and so on, who became provost or president. So that was very much confirmatory to me that, this is a possibility. I've had a very deep, personal level discussions very regularly, and I and my mentor, President Stanley, met every week, I think, for 38 series of 1 hours on a weekly basis in terms of really deep engagement, which has been, very powerful. So, that's a broader scale. When it gets to really in terms of the fellowship itself, it made me realize also in the grand scheme of things as higher education leaders, how impactful our day-to-day work is. Just observing the number of things every day are achieved, discussed and done by the president, by the provost, by the EVP for Health Science. There are so many highly impactful things that our enterprise does, so that I think we all should be proud as higher education institution members at whether it's in the US or other countries. We produce knowledge. Knowledge is the most powerful product one can imagine on this planet. I think we should be very proud of ourselves. We make impactful contributions on daily basis, primarily to our central stakeholders, to our students, but also to society in so many different ways, whether it's public or private universities, but particularly my bias is the public universities, as I have been for the last more than 2 decades. Also, it made me appreciate the issues we address in academic aspects as well as administrative are highly interconnected and complex issues. The fellowship made me appreciate how complex are some of the decisions are, and one decision you make an academic aspect, administrative can impact many other dimensions, as well as can be often may not be most likely not something that everybody would agree with, so it might be controversial. You have to balance many things, and then you have to be courageous enough to make a decision. So that helped me a lot to understand the intricacies and the complexity of it. In addition, understanding, fulfilling our academic needs, particularly from the point of student success, right? So we want to produce successful students. How complex that is. It's not just about providing high quality education or academic, right? So you have to deal with many issues, mental health or social justice, debt burden issues or financial aid, and then relationship violence and sexual misconduct issues. When I chose Michigan State as my host institutes, we all looked at, as you know, MJ, various different potential host universities. Michigan State has just recovered from Larry Nassar scandal. That is, hugely national, well-reported issue. But as Michigan State recovered that, one of the unique things Michigan State did is developing a unique strategic plan for relationship violence and sexual misconduct, RVSM strategic plan. That, I believe, is very unique. To my knowledge, no other university has really developed a university-wide strategic plan. That was really commendable. But as I looked at different universities, I really wanted to understand what was the history at Michigan State, but also how Michigan State is planning to address it, which can be a model to others. And that's related directly to our student success as well. So lots of things like that. And with the new leadership, in fact, strategic planning was a great exposure I had. MSU developed its 10-year MSU 2030 strategic plan. I had a great opportunity to get exposure working with the strategic plan implementation committee at the university level. And among one of the 6 pillars is sustainable health. which is really near and dear to my heart. And I was able to contribute a little bit to the best of my knowledge based on my experience at Ohio State and a number of other exposures. And that, whether it's Board of Trustees exposure or a number of other areas. So overall, the American Council Education Fellowship has been really tremendously productive experience, in my opinion, and I very much look forward to utilize the leadership skills and everything I learned in my future journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Just for everyone to know, I actually did my fellowship at Grand Valley State University, and it truly is a transformational experience because you get to see other parts of higher education that you don't necessarily get to see on the day to day. And I think that's what really made it so transformational for me. I'm like, oh, okay, this is how they, work in enrollment or in advancement and some of the different departments. So I absolutely agree with you. And just to stay on the topic of professional development, because we recognize that everyone won't be able to be an ACE fellow or leave their family for an entire year to go, be a fellow at another host institution. But there are other things they can do to prepare in terms of professional development. And so what recommendations do you have in terms of, if someone is a junior faculty member and they know they want to be a department head or even a dean one day, what would you say to that person on different ways they can prepare themselves for those different leadership roles?
Yeah, excellent point. Yes, I think first of all, the mental preparedness is key, right? So, as I said earlier, the person himself, herself, be ready to serve others and others, and be vulnerable in a way that, if I take a leadership position, then I'm going to serve others, right? Once you have that mindset, definitely there are many preparations for leadership in terms of honing your leadership skills. Typically, one of I think the biggest steps I made, in my opinion, back in around 2008, 2009, around that time, is really improving my emotional intelligence. Often in academia and faculty members are really good intellectually. I haven't checked mine recently, but we may have high IQ. But when it comes to emotional intelligence or the EQ, we may not be that good. I think, in general, for any leadership, that emotional intelligence, I think Daniel Goleman is one of the gurus, leaders that I read a book early on that helped me very much. In fact, at our campus, there is kind of peer mentoring. And I remember at the time I was associate professor in the department chair. We were having a lunch, which he's the first person who mentioned it to me. Look at emotional intelligence. You could be a great leader, but, having emotional intelligence is key. So I think definitely books like that by Daniel Goleman or others who wrote on emotional intelligence is I believe, is key for us. In fact, even if without assuming an entitled type of leadership, we all are leaders in our own ways, right? So improving emotional intelligence is critical. As people need, of course, to persist in assuming leadership, that persistence and not be discouraged is critical, because we all face various challenges in our units, academic units, or at a personal level or beyond. I can tell you many things I've faced in terms of this professional journey. But that persistence, one of the books also I read several years ago, like Good to Great by Jim Collins, and that's famous book, right? There is a hedgehog example. You have to persist a small step at a time to improve. You don't need to get, let's say, if a faculty member is interested in being a department chair and that did not work or declined or didn't get offered. That's okay. Doesn't mean that you are not a great leader. You are a great leader, but improving your skills, like with that hedgehog formula, Jim Collins, but also practicing leadership in your own ways at any position you are in at currently, it opens a door for the next step. Show it, prove it, let others learn that you are a great leader, because often what happens is at a position X you are in currently, people do not see you at the next level of a position because you don't have an experience, you're not into that position. But if at your own position, current position, showing leadership skills and leading programs, and academia gives us a good power. Definitely being in a tenure track system, it gave me the opportunity to do what I want to do, but that has impact to the unit and to the university. So not being discouraged is very important. Being persistent is important, and there are many leadership books, and the basic ones like the Covey series, whether it's the Principle, the Leadership. I've read different books and I enjoy reading those books, but each one of them contributed to my journey. So
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that you talked about emotional intelligence, because that is so important. And sometimes I think it gets overlooked, the importance of emotional intelligence. But I mean, it's necessary because, like you talked about, you have to collaborate, you have to work with people, you have to, when I think of emotional intelligence, I think of it's very people centric. Like you have to have uh, the emotional intelligence in order to be able to engage effectively with different stakeholders, not just inside of the institution, but outside of the institution as well. And so I guess one of my last questions for you, um, because higher education can be a bit of a bubble, right? and I love the academy, but sometimes we're very insular. But when you think about collaborating and working with outside stakeholders, can you talk about the importance of community engagement and the role that plays on, becoming a leader, and just even like the importance of community engagement? Because sometimes I think, it's really good to learn from other industries as well and learn like, oh, this is what they're doing over at NASA, or, I'm making this up, but, what they're doing in other industries, and what can I bring back to my institution so that I can be better in my role?
yeah, excellent question. Yeah, that's one of the key passion I have, and where I feel, our impact would lie beyond our students. So that is great. In fact, as the executive director of Global One Health Initiative, we have programs in terms of training, research, applied research that has, impact on communities, as well as outreach that involves communities locally, regionally, internationally, which overall global, right? So I think one of the first thing to know is, we live in a more and more interconnected and interdependent world, right? So we all have to realize that. As a university, as higher education institutions, typically in public and land-grant university systems that I'm aware, but overall, our responsibility to our citizens is not just students. Students are members of the community in the first place, but communities looked up at us, universities, to guide them, to lead them, to be the voice for them. We are the educated manpower concentrated in a campus, right? So that's what's expected from us. It's not just being, of course, the ivory tower. So knowing this interconnectedness and recognizing that, I think we have to do more and more. We have to fulfill our social responsibility. That's partly, in fact, my ACE project deals with social responsibility. How can we transform our higher education or expand its mission in terms of making impactful contributions beyond our students into our communities. How do we fulfill our social responsibilities in a sustainable way? So that is deeply my passion, but also highly important to higher education. And so, as we have witnessed in many ways in recent years, be it a COVID-19 pandemic, or social justice issues, or be it Roe v. Wade, others. So I think higher education deals with any of these issues at academic level, but also being a voice to our communities as well at outreach level, beyond the education and beyond the research and innovation. When you look at globally for Star Scholars audience, the United Nations has about 17 sustainable development goals. The sector that touches to all of these 17 priorities, if the audience is not familiar, you can easily find it at the United Nations website. With all of the 17 sustainable development goals is academia. Academia touches to all of them, whether it is health and well-being, which is, I think, priority number 3. Quality education is in priority number 4, is at the center of what we do. Climate change, I think, is priority number 13 or so. It's every part of the 17 priorities, academia has a role to play. So definitely our mission in academia has to go beyond focusing only our students, which students remain the most important stakeholders for us. But we have to go beyond. How do we solve problems that are important to locally, regionally, and internationally? And how can we really play our share, which is from the community standpoint, it's huge. So I think that's very important. According to the national academies, in fact, higher education knowledge is involved in 85% or so of the economics of the United States, right? So we play a critical role. We are responsible to economic well-being of not just individual and families, but also to the nation. And, by virtue of that, to internationally. So I think we have to recognize that. And also, as the world population grows, United States is one of the 10 fastest growing, by the way, population-wise, in addition to 4 African countries and 5 Asian countries, and the US are the 10 fastest ones. Higher education enrollment would grow. Of course, there is a demographic cliff in high school graduates in the US. We all know that, but in the grand scheme of things, higher education enrollment worldwide is growing. Fastest growing in some regions, slow growing in other regions. However, it's growing everywhere. And our role will remain critical. I think we have to, all of us as higher education should be aware of that. And of course, that is expected, really considering how the world grows. In the United States, higher education remains a popular destination to higher education in general. So, these are all very important factors we have to recognize. I think our higher education system has a much more bright future. So I think recognizing that and being proud of what we do, while at the same time trying to solve the challenges we face regularly is critical. So happy to expand any of this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, this is excellent. And you know what, you touched on so many great points. And yeah, no, I'm really glad we were able to have this discussion today, because I know I'll probably go back and rewatch and say, oh yeah, he brought up a really good point here, and just kind of take my own notes. But you're absolutely right. I think the Academy has the ability to help solve some of our most complex issues in the world that we're dealing with, and we already know that, right? Because of the research and the work we do, and we are positioned to really collaborate with so many different organizations and entities in the world. And you're absolutely right. Even though we've seen, we're experiencing a decline somewhat. Well, some organizations are, while others are still increasing in terms of enrollment. But from a global standpoint, you're absolutely right. There are more and more individuals who are going to colleges and universities throughout the world. And so that is something I'm glad you brought that point up too, because I know in the US, there's been a lot of discussion about the number of high school graduates that have decided that they're not going to go to college right away. But it is something that we need to consider is like, even though we may be dealing with some really specific issues here, globally, when we look at where we are in terms of college and university enrollment, there is this increase. And so what can we do to maybe attract some of those students to come to the US and, you know,
well, we also have to realize one point, one dimension of this is also the workforce, the existing workforce capacity in the United States, especially hopefully in the aftermath of the pandemic, there will be a significant shift in the workforce needs in various areas. There will be upskilling needs, improving the workforce, existing workforce to be trained in a better way, as well as reskilling in shifting to different areas of expertise or skill sets. So I think there is a huge demand. There will be. It's already, we know that. There have been reports by McKinsey and various reports that came out in the last 1 year showing a huge demand for workforce development, upskilling, reskilling. I think that is another big area and opportunity for how our higher education system. So we have to pay attention to as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point as well. I'm glad you touched on that. So I guess in closing, if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice in terms of, this is why you should consider taking on a leadership position in higher education at some point. I mean, and we recognize that, everyone has different goals in terms of their career. But for the person who may be hesitant about going from faculty to administrative role, what would you say to that person?
Well, I would say that, I really encourage people to take higher education leadership role. It's definitely is a very fulfilling, you have to be deeply passionate, but it's a very rewarding. We all have one life on this planet. If you really want to amplify your impact, amplify really your life and the impact you can make on this planet, in multiple ways, I think it's leadership role. This applies to different sectors, but being in higher education, serving, be it as a department chair, be it center director, or be it a dean or higher level position, that's where we really truly amplify our impact. So I really encourage people to consider leadership roles in higher education. And I am sure, if you have deeply the passion to do it, it is highly fulfilling and you will be proud of yourself and the impact you're making and the legacy you left. So I encourage everyone to consider it. Absolutely. I'm very happy to serve as a leader and, expand my roles in the future as in my leadership roles as well, but very much encourage people to consider it seriously and not hesitate taking leadership roles. So
absolutely. Well, great advice. And thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure our listeners will really enjoy everything that you've had to say, and you've provided such great advice and it's so insightful. So I really want to thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone who is listening today. Once again, we'll be here every month on the second Tuesday of the month. And so thank you.
Thank you so much, MJ. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.